Daniel Ortiz lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a city of adobe walls and desert sunsets, where the Sangre de Cristo Mountains cast long shadows, and he spent 27 years married to Laura. At 53, in the amber glow of October 2022, he unmoored, not with a clash of wills, but with a soft resolve to reclaim a life that had cooled to embers. They'd raised a son, owned a stucco house near the plaza, and lived a dance of days that once felt vibrant. He was a chef, his hands seasoned by spices and heat, crafting meals that filled plates across town. She worked as a nurse, her days a whirl of bandages and care, her nights weary but kind. By his 50s, their dance had slowed to a shuffle, their love aflame flickered low. This is Daniel's story, a gentle release from a tethered past, a journey through solitude and spice, and a rediscovery of warmth by 56, set against the sun-baked charm of the Southwest. Daniel met Laura in 1994 at a fiesta on Canyon Road, both 26, both swept into the swirl of mariachi music and the scent of roasted chiles drifting through the air. He wore a faded apron over a linen shirt, a tray of tamales in hand, his dark hair tousled from a day in a cramped kitchen. She stood by a lantern-lit stall, a slender figure in scrubs, sipping horchata after a shift at the hospital, her brown curls catching the golden light. They talked, about the pinyon smoke curling skyward, about his love for flavors that burned and soothed, about her gift for mending broken bodies. He offered her a tamale, their fingers brushing, and asked her out as the band struck a slow waltz. She smiled, warm as the dusk, and said yes. A year later, in September 1995, they married in a courtyard near the cathedral basilica, his boots scuffed from prep work, her dress simple and white, the air rich with sage as friends tossed marigolds. He promised to cook her a life, she vowed to heal its hurts. For decades, they stirred that pot together. Their son, Javier, arrived in 1997, a sturdy boy with Daniel's broad grin and Laura's steady gaze. Daniel traded late-night prep for early suppers, his knife chopping carrots for Javier's purees, his voice humming boleros over the stove. Laura juggled shifts, her stethoscope a constant, the house alive with Javier's babble and the sizzle of pans. In 1999, they bought the house, a low-slung stucco with terracotta tiles, a kiva fireplace in the living room, and a patio where the desert stretched wide. Daniel built a kitchen island from mesquite, its grain warm under his hands, the space thick with cumin and garlic each night. Laura hung tapestries, reds, oranges, blues, her garden blooming with lavender and chiles she'd dry in the sun. They'd hike the Atalaya Trail as a family, Javier scrambling over rocks, the mountains a jagged frame to their laughter, the sun hot on their backs. Money came in waves, winters chilled the pipes, but the house simmered with their shared heat. The fire dimmed slow. By his 40s, Daniel felt the warmth fade. Javier left for Albuquerque in 2016, studying architecture, his room a relic of sketchpads and soccer trophies. The house quieted, its adobe walls soaking up silence, the fireplace cold. Laura took extra shifts, her scrubs a second skin, her chatter thinning to tired sighs when she slumped home. Long day, Dan, you know how it is. He buried himself in the restaurant, perfecting mole and grilling carne asada, his nights late with the clatter of pots, the spice no longer reaching his soul. He'd try, let's hike La Luz, see the view, or, how about dinner at La Choza, but she'd wave a hand, too drained, maybe later. They ate apart, slept apart, the patio's chiles wilting, their voices lost in the desert wind. By 2020, he took the den, its couch sagging, the window framing a city they'd outgrown. The release came gentle in October 2022. Daniel was 53, his hands rough from years of knives and flames, his hair flecked with gray under a bandana he wore to catch sweat. He'd just plated a dish, enchiladas with a salsa verde he'd tweaked for hours, when he found Laura in the kitchen, nursing a tea, her scrubs wrinkled from a double shift. "We're not moving forward," he said, his voice soft as the dusk outside. She looked up, her curls limp, her eyes heavy. I know, Dan, we're stuck, aren't we? He nodded, steady. Yeah, Laura, we are, it's time. They sat by the kiva, the fire unlit, the air cool with fall, and agreed, 27 years was a dish cooked through. No rancor, no tears, just a recipe that had lost its zest, a meal to set aside. They parted with a clasp of hands, her fingers warm from the mug, a last taste of what was. Divorce at 53 was a dry wind. They sold the house, too warm with memory, and split the take even. Laura moved to an apartment near the hospital, her life a pulse of patience and quiet nights. Daniel rented a casita off Old Santa Fe Trail, a small adobe with a tin roof, a single window spilling desert light, a stove that barely fit his pans. Javier called from Albuquerque, Dad, why'd you let it cool off like this? Daniel stumbled, I didn't, Mijo, it just did, and we had to stir new pots. Friends split, some stayed with Laura, sharing her shift's tales, others met him for beers at 2nd Street. The first year was a simmer. He cooked through a haze, his flavors sharp but his heart dull, nights spent pacing the casita, the wind rattling the roof a call he couldn't place. He missed Javier's chatter, Laura's hum, the house's crackle in a storm. Sleep came thin, the casita's stillness a spice he couldn't taste. A flame flickered in 2023. At 54, Daniel joined a pottery class, a spur after a sous chef raved about clay, his hands trading ladles for wheels, shaping earth at a studio on Cerrillos Road. He fumbled, pots collapsing into lumps, but he stayed, drawn to the slow turn, the wet grit under his nails, the kiln's heat a new kind of fire. The group was lively, retirees, a young sculptor, a widow named Rosa who glazed bowls with a steady hand and a laugh like chimes. They met twice weekly, sharing clay and stories, the studio warm with dust and chatter. Daniel fired his first piece, a wide bowl, its rim uneven, glazed a deep terracotta, and set it on his counter, a vessel for the chiles he still roasted. It wasn't perfect, but it held, a spark rekindled. By 55, Daniel was heating up. He sold his car, bought a horse, a chestnut mare named Luna, and rode the trails near Tesuk, her hooves kicking dust, the desert blooming with yucca and sage around him. He wasn't swift, hikers passed, Luna snorted at steep climbs, but speed didn't matter, the ride did, the sun baking his shoulders a rhythm he craved. He started a journal, Flavors and Clay, writing about divorce, pots, and the tang of life anew, his words rich as his old recipes. Staff read it, then strangers, folks in Taos, Las Cruces, a guy in Tucson saying, I'm firing up too. Javier visited, saw the bowl, the saddle by the door, hugged him, you're cooking again, Dad, in your way. Rosa invited him to a salsa night, he went, dancing slow, the music a pulse he felt deep. At 56, Daniel glowed warm. He cut restaurant hours, taught cooking at a community center, tacos, sopas, the secrets of masa, his hands steady, his voice rich with spice and stories. He rode to Abiquiu one golden weekend, camped by the Chama River, woke to a sunrise that painted the cliffs red and orange, Luna grazing nearby. He wasn't flush, his casita smelled of clay and cumin, his horse ate half his budget. He wasn't famed, his journal had 450 readers, his pots stayed local. But he was Daniel, bold, alive, simmering. Laura remarried in 2025, a doctor from her ward, calm and good. He tipped his hat, she'd found her bomb, he'd lit his fire. Divorce at 53 left me cold, he writes now, his pen sure, the window framing a desert he'd claimed. It taught me to burn bright again. Across America, from Santa Fe's sands to every sunlit stretch, people like Daniel unmoor every day. Gray divorces aren't ashes, they're embers. I'm Jordan Lane, and this is Gray Divorce Diaries. Daniel's tale is real, rich, raw, radiant. If it warms you, subscribe. Every day, a new story, people like us, finding heat after 50. You're not alone. Let's stoke your flame together.